A really good question has arose in one of the chicken keeping groups that I'm a part of, and it is, at which point should a buyer of hatching eggs, most specifically shipped hatching eggs, at which point should the buyer get in touch with the breeder to let the breeder know how the hatch went? And look, this may vary, the standard for this may vary from breeder to breeder, but I'll share with you in general what could be some potential things that may have to do with the breeder and which could be potential things that likely have to do with shipping and incubation practices. Personally, when I purchase shipped eggs from somebody, I either will purchase again from that person or I won't purchase again from that person. And at this point, the only time I'm going to get in touch with a breeder about hatch rates from shipped eggs that I purchased and have shipped to me is if it's like a friend of mine or somebody who I know is trying to keep track of those results and wants me to keep track and report back to them. Otherwise, I'm just going to do my chaos hatching thing. I'm just going to hatch the eggs hopefully and hope for the best. There are really only two things that the breeder has control over. The number one thing is the fertilization. The thing that they should be monitoring, that we are monitoring, is fertilization rates in our flocks and also how the eggs are packaged. Most of us will package our eggs with a few extra eggs to account for a couple that may be broken in transit, because sometimes even with the best packaging, eggs can get broken in transit. Once we package those eggs and they leave our hands, unfortunately, we have like zero control over how the post office handles them and zero control over shipping times, even though they were estimated to arrive in a certain amount. We have no control over what happens in transit. Most of us are really empathetic when you reach out to us and you say, oh my God, these eggs were supposed to be here this day. They didn't. Oh my God, they delivered them to the house, even though they were supposed to be delivered to the post office. But again, this is so far out of our hands, and we are as heavy-hearted about it as you are. But it's not always a death sentence. Like a couple extra days in transit isn't always the worst thing. Being straight delivered to your home isn't always the worst thing. I would say always throw those eggs in the incubator and see how they do. You might be surprised. Fertilization issues are really one of the only issues where I feel a message to the breeder is warranted. And not to be accusatory, because again, in shipping, in transit, with the handling, with x-ray machines, with changes in barometric pressure, if the eggs are being air transported, all of these things can contribute to viability issues, and not necessarily fertilization issues, but developmental hatchability issues, okay? And the other thing to note is that once eggs have been already incubating, you can no longer crack open those eggs to see if they're fertilized or not. You'll be able to see if they've been developing because there'll be blood or veins or some form of a mass inside of the eggs, but you cannot check for a bullseye once eggs have been incubating. Let's say that somebody gets a dozen hatching eggs from me and zero eggs, none of those eggs develop. That is something that I personally would be interested to know, because in that case, that may be a case where there could be some fertilization issues that are going on in a flock. Sometimes they pop up out of nowhere, and sometimes if we're not hatching from our own flocks regularly, sometimes, unfortunately, it's the buyers who can make us aware that we need to crack some eggs open and do a double check to check for fertilization in the flock. When this happens for me, I'll go into my coops and crack a couple eggs open and check for bullseyes just to make sure that it's not a fertilization issue on my end. If I do find in that scenario that I'm having a fertilization issue on that end, then once I get fertilization back regulated again, I will reship back to those buyers. But again, just because there isn't development in eggs that have been shipped does not necessarily mean that there is 100% of the time fertilization issues in that parent flock, and the breeder will know more once they take a deeper look into that in their flock.